Hey, everybody. Welcome to our annual, breakdown of our top 46 list. It's 46 this year as we've increased, as farm system's gotten better, and we'll get to why it's gotten better here shortly as well. And if you're watching this, you're also, thank you for donating to our GoFundMe, which is out on our link. You can help us get to spring training and beyond with all the site costs and all that stuff. So appreciate the donations and the people who have signed up for Patreon who got a chance to check out our prospect reports. We did them on like an interesting style. So we did them on a picture or picture graphic. Then we did the reports and we did like a summary. So then there's a little more detailed reports coming on our graph. So for people that got a chance to sign up on Patreon and got that stuff early, great. And so this is kind of like the video portion, kind of explaining everything a little bit and putting our words in the video, I guess, for better. Yeah.
Just a little visual companion to our top prospect list. The system is about as strong as it's ever been. I don't know if it definitely necessitated a list to 46, but the way we do it is, and this year we just kind of, Rogelio, Jerry, and I, we each made our individual lists. And this is how we've done it for a while, but most of us went up to about 50, maybe a little higher, just putting players' names in there. And then we combined them, and we actually ended up with exactly 30 players who got votes from all three of us. But that list kind of felt a little incomplete. So we basically opened it up to anybody who got 2 votes, except for these bottom 5 that or bottom 6 that we X'd out because none of them got votes inside the top 35. So we're like, that doesn't really count. But we still want to mention them. And even beyond that, we ended up with 46 names, and there were 28 other players who got at least 1 vote from us. So, and we'll have a piece at the very end where we kind of talk about our sleepers or our favorites or the guys that slipped through the cracks, because we each have 1 player that we put in our individual top 30s who didn't make the list at all. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, so it's just kind of a composite view of the system. And down here at the bottom, the system itself is very strong through like the top 15 and even into the top 20, if you want to say. Then after that, it's kind of pick your poison. Do you like, kind of organizational guys who could come up and help that are veterans, or do you like these super young guys who haven't done anything and might flame and go a billion different directions? So we kind of mixed a little bit of that, and then there's a bunch of relievers. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty good list. But as we like to say, right, it's always just a snapshot in time. This is just the way we feel about these guys heading into spring training, and I'm sure we'll feel very differently about many of them in about 2 months.
Yeah, and if there's one constant with this list that's been perhaps a constant in the past, probably 5-6 years, is relievers. I mean, the Tigers have always been, not always, but the Tigers have done a decent job in the last decade or so, at least producing a reliever or 2 that's been serviceable. But now it's becoming more of an army per se. Or not going to say army, but it's, maybe it is becoming more of an army of guys that are coming to be regular contributors. And so that is kind of reflected on the part of the list that I think it goes through is that the meat and potato part. Like I think probably through 34 through 20 is where you see a lot of those relievers but also a couple starters too as well that you could go, could make or break their way up to Toledo at some point, or even the major league roster. And we'll get to those at some point, but I don't want people to disparage like 46 through 40 are like just, chopped liver or anything, but go ahead.
Yeah, we put them in there for a reason. All these players have something about them that we like or that we think that could get them to the big leagues. I'd say the big difference between now and 10, 15 years ago is that there aren't any explicit relievers in our top 20. I don't think there's some guys who may end up being relievers, but back in the day, you could start finding pure relief prospects in like the top 10 of the Tiger system. Right? That's just how it always was. You'd have like your, Ruffins, Chase Ruffin, guys like that, Corey Knable,
Green.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he ended up becoming a very good reliever, but yeah. So I don't know. The system is deeper. It's better. There's more position prospects. And I don't know. The bottom of it is maybe not quite as exciting, but these players are interesting and worth talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And we start with number 46 too, with Eric Silva, who the Tigers picked up in the trade with the Mark Cannon trade back from the Giants, who is relatively young for being in Double-A, and he was also on the Arizona Fall League roster. And between him and Andrew Sears, who was at number 45, there's I think that those two right there are kind of in that we have them in 35. So guys, and we want to explain a little bit how that all works.
The future value, yes, the FV.
Yeah, FB. So I have the list here. I mean, we have the list is okay.
You're just looking for what the values correspond to.
Like the one, the what you shared with me. I have it right here.
Yeah, so I mean, a 35 is kind of considered like an emergency call-up type player.
Yep.
Somebody, if there are a bunch of injuries, that this player could come up to the big leagues and contribute in some way. You know, it might not necessarily be a great player, but they've got enough to get up to the big leagues. And that's where we stopped, really. And honestly, like we said, there could be another 20, 25 guys that fit into that 35 FV. But yeah, so, and with Eric Silva, like you said, he's young. I think he's still 22. He's basically, it's an interesting situation because he was a high school draft pick, and he's basically got the arsenal of a starter, but he's a reliever. And so his fastball isn't very hard, like by modern terms. It's like probably 93, 94, but he's got a couple of breaking balls. He's got a changeup. He throws a decent amount of strikes. It's just not terribly exciting stuff. But as you said, he's already in Double-A at 22. He may be in Toledo this year. And it's just not a huge ceiling, right? There's a good chance that he can come up and give you, an inning or two every now and then in the 5th, 6th innings for the Tigers. But that's about it. I don't picture much more from him, barring, who knows? Maybe the Tigers get him in the lab and get him like 3 more miles an hour in his fastball, and then you're dealing with something. But for right now, I think he's just kind of a emergency call up as a reliever.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can like about his slider. He has a pretty good fastball too. He's got some good riding action on his fastball. And this is when he was in the Richmond Flying Squirrels for the Double-A affiliate for the Giants. And so this is when the Tigers first picked him up, and so that way people get an idea of what they're getting. And yeah, the tailing action on his fastball is good. And I think that is the guy who could come in and be able to, especially Toledo. I think Toledo is going to be a very like back and forth kind of situation this year, especially if the Tigers do not sign another reliever, because
there he is doing his, he does his like yoga pose before every pitch. It's kind of funny. Stretches his arms up above his head. I think his best pitch is either his slider or his curveball. They're both kind of flash above average. But
slider's got some good sweeping action against them righties, away from righties.
But he's like you said, there's some interesting things about him. You could argue for him higher on the list. It's a pure relief prospect, and those guys can go in a billion different directions. Sometimes they're nobodies and they come up and they're successful. Sometimes they're highly thought of and they come up and don't do anything. But that's where we start our list. The next guy, Andrew Sears, I actually think that he's got some ceiling to him, and it wouldn't shock me if he's pushing into the top 30 at some point during this season. He's a lefty with really kind of low arm slot, and he's also relatively young for a college pitcher. I think he might have just turned 22. They got him on I think the 11th round in 2023. So he spent all of this past year in Low A Lakeland, and he's got some interesting like swing and miss stuff with his fastball. Yeah, so he just turned 22 in October. So yeah, pretty young. His fastball got decent velocity to it, decent movement. His slider is really good. He's got some feel for a changeup. It's just with him, it's throwing more strikes. He walked 5 per 9 last year, and again, he's a guy that you think if he could rein in that command and control a little bit, then he's got a potential future as a back end starter. But he kind of has the look of an interesting reliever down the road. So that's kind of why he's back here in this group. I don't know if we have any video of him or not.
We don't have any video of him. I was trying to look for some video on him. And right now with Twitter changing the algorithm a little bit too, it was hard to find any video of him.
Yeah. So, I'll put together a video for him and we'll put it up on the YouTube page.
Okay. Yeah. So let's move on to number 40.
44.
44. That would be Mr. Jank Diaz, who really, there's not a lot of video on him either, but I know that the Tigers are a big fan of his arm. Was injured, just I think maybe they had a cup of coffee or just a couple innings of work.
He made a few starts, like a handful of starts in the complex league, and he's a fascinating story. Of course, I think he was the 7th or 8th round pick, kid he's originally from the Dominican Republic, but had been living in Pennsylvania, and the Tigers kind of found him in the draft league. And when he was in the draft league, he was pushing the upper 90s with an interesting looking breaking ball and a changeup. But down in rookie league, and we do have some video of him on the YouTube page.
Yes, we do.
It's kind of interesting. He and Paul Wilson both seem to have severe trouble locating their fastballs. And Paul Wilson didn't even make our top 46. But
we've heard good things about though.
Yeah, I mean he's one of the guys that I was going to highlight later. He was on my like top 50, but he and Diaz had the same issues where they could not locate their fastball to save their lives. But you'll see in the clips, you'll see Diaz occasionally break off a really nice breaking ball and occasionally a really nice changeup. But it's not consistent at all. And he's a big, strong kid. And you see he's just spraying the ball all over the place. But you see the building blocks there. And if he can, put it all together in the next few years, it's probably a reliever down the road. But as we said, there's strength there, and there's 3 real pitches.
Yeah,
And,
see that change? I'm sorry, that looked like was that the change up there?
I think it was a breaking ball. He'll throw some really sharp ones, and some other ones that just kind of float in. But the fastball, as you see here, it's like 92, 94. There's some good arm side run on it right there, but it's just I think he ended up walking almost as many people as he struck out in very limited. So there's the changeup right there.
Yeah.
At one point, he throws like 3 changeups in a row, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Right
yeah.
There. Yeah.
So he's got the 3 pitches. He's got the body. He just needs more experience, and so that's why he's way down here at the bottom of the list. We again, guys like this sometimes shoot up the list. Rainer Castillo was a guy who walked everybody 2 years ago or 3 years ago and was hurt 2 years ago, and then this year he's pushing his way into our top 20. So guys can move quickly.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the next guy on our list, Max Alba, who is a guy who really by the way, there is some video. We do have a little bit of video of him.
We have some video on Twitter of him because we saw him in Lansing.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, there was
because he's one of those guys that's fun metrically because it's he only throws like 91 to 93. He'll top at 94, but it's like a 2,600 RPM fastball with like 20 inches of induced vertical break. It's crazy, and he had a good season. It's just he's another pure relief arm in high A. He throws a lot of strikes. He's got 3 or 4 other pitches, so it's a full arsenal there. Yeah, I'm looking right now. He struck out 63 and walked just 8 in 57 innings last year. But it's not, again, it's kind of like Silva. It's not a fastball that jumps off the page in terms of velocity, but it has good shape to it.
Okay.
And you see us in person, yeah.
9.
You can
Yeah,
hear us talking.
Yeah.
Is this a curveball?
93, 26.58 on the fastball.
So 26.58 in terms of spin rate.
There's a slider, 86.
That curve has got that loopy.
26.57.
It's got some good depth to it too.
Yeah, so I mean, there's
the hell out of the fastball.
Spins the
Who's
hell
that
out
guy
of
talking? Sign that guy up to talk about baseball. But yeah, so you see it. I mean, this is behind the plate view, obviously, for people who might just be listening. But so yeah, again, another pure relief arm, but some interesting stuff there, minus the velocity.
Yeah,
and the next guy is a guy who's been around for a while. We've talked about him a fair amount, and last year some things seemed to be coming together for him. He really seemed to be, particularly on defense, he seemed like he was really growing into a solid shortstop, which we didn't expect because he had been a left side infielder and then a center fielder and then probably a second baseman, and then he played shortstop last year and he was doing a good job. And it's Trey Cruz, who has always had some fun tools and skills. Really, his main offensive skill seems to be able to work long at bats and take walks. But he's got a little bit of power. He'll steal you a base or two. But yeah, he's never really hit much. And he was doing okay last year, and then unfortunately he injured his arm, and I think he had Tommy John surgery. So who knows? With position players, it shouldn't take him as long. But if he's playing shortstop, it may be a little bit longer.
I thought it was something too with his. He had like a groin injury or some sort too, maybe. Or maybe maybe it was. I thought. Oh, you're right. You're right. It was Tommy John, but I thought for something else. I thought it was something else he had.
I don't remember exactly,
Yeah.
but again, he's the sort of guy who, an emergency. I mean, he plays just about every position, and like we said, he's a switch hitter. He gets on base. He's never going to hit for a high average, but he does a lot of other things. There's a little bit of like a Gage Workman here. It's not, the tools aren't as loud as Gage Workman, but I think the plate discipline's better, significantly better. There's still some swing and miss there, but so he's the sort of guy who could come up in an emergency and help out a team. But we'll see how healthy he is this spring.
Yeah, and Gabe Alvarez has indicated how well of a defender he got after the year before. I mean, we heard a couple things that he was kind of, I don't say necessarily a hot dog in it, but night and day difference in terms of defense in center field, and he was very clutch for them in their first championship in terms of just playing good defense, especially when they were really getting called. This is 2 years ago when they had a series of call-ups between Meadows and Perez at the time too. So it's his role in the organization has continuously gotten better. So, and we go back to the bullpen, and we're at
41
now with Chase Lee, who they picked up in the Andrew Chafin duo.
Yeah, and he's an interesting. They added into the 40-man, and we've talked about him a little bit, but it's a really interesting arm slot. It's an arm slot that they haven't had for a while. Almost, it's so low sidearm that it's almost looks like a submariner. Really, like he kind of dips down like he's going to be a submariner, and then throws sidearm. But and he doesn't throw hard. It's like 88 to 91 tops. But hitters have a real hard time picking up, particularly right-handed hitters. And I think that's Roman Anthony right there, or Christian Campbell. And he's got a pretty good slider too. So he's got a sinker, he's got a four-seamer, he's got a pretty good slider. And he'll throw a cutter occasionally. So no real off-speed pitch there, but the cutter's what he's going to use to help him with left-handed batters. And it's just an interesting look. And it was one of the things when Chase Lee got added to the 40-man, and Tyler Owens and Tyler Madison, I had kind of this existential, like, do we need to start ranking more relievers? And we kind of discussed it, and it wasn't, we're like, we don't necessarily need, I was thinking like, we'll do our own like reliever rankings, and we could do that during the course of the season. But it turned out that, if we just put a bunch of 35 FVs on the list, then we can get a bunch of relievers in there. So that's kind of
problem solved. Yeah.
But like I said, guys like this, you never really know until they come up and do it. And he could come up and be unhittable, or he could come up and get bombed. I don't know. Big leaguers are pretty good, but it's his numbers were really good last year. The strikeouts were high, the walks were low, batting average was low. So we'll see if he gets a chance.
It kind of like is a frisbee, almost. I don't want to say frisbee it, but it does kind of have that that kind of release point too with his extension, and that's probably why sometimes batters have a hard time picking it up with, especially sidearmers like that. And I kind of think of it as far as like right-handed side. How often do you get a right-handed side? Usually it's lefties. I think of like Mike Myers, the former Tiger reliever in the 90s. There was another guy in the who was it? The Clay
Rapata,
yeah, Clay Rapata. But righties, not, it doesn't happen very often, does it?
Not well, certainly not for the Tigers. I'm thinking, was it Steve Cishek? I think was kind of a side armor.
That's a good call. Steve, or who was he? Who was it? Dwayne Dwayne Belilo wasn't a side armor, was he? I mean,
he was a lefty. He may have been a low 3/4. And there's another kind of long time side armory reliever who's been around for a while, but I'm forgetting his name. But it can work. It's just and there's some other guys, like the Rogerses. There are guys in the league who make it work, but it's kind of like almost like projecting a knuckleballer, right? Like it looks like it might work, but you can't tell until they actually have done it. So that's why he's the first guy out, and we have these guys, and as players graduate, they'll get moved in, and there are going to be a couple people who graduate this year for sure. So And then we get to our actual list, the top 40 through 36 here.
Yes.
Beginning with a guy, and I went back and looked, and we had him as high as number 6 on our list 2 years ago. Izaac Pacheco, who is now 40th on our list. And that's because he's basically exactly who he was 2 years ago, if not worse, which is unfortunate. We saw him when he first came up from Lakeland into West Michigan in late 2022. We he didn't hit for a high average, which we kind of understood, right? He's moving up a level, but he hit a couple monster home runs. He looked athletic enough to handle third base, a good arm. He looked like a top 10 prospect. I mean, I think I even said, if he continues, he might be a top 100 prospect in baseball. And since then, he just hasn't hit. Strikeout rate has gone up.
He was our potential breakout prospect in 2023.
Yeah. And it just hasn't happened for him. He hasn't hit, I think he's hit 218 in 200 games since then with a 32% strikeout rate. He still has plenty of raw power. And when he gets to it, it's fun to watch.
Inception.
But yeah. And one of the problems is that he's always terrific in Lansing. He always plays well in Lansing. And then, hey, look at that. Yeah. And then, but when he seems like elsewhere, it just doesn't work. And so I don't think they can move him up to Erie. So this is going to be his 3rd full season in West Michigan heading in this year. And maybe something clicks for him. He's still only 22, which is the average age of a player in the Midwest League. So you just treat him like he's coming out of college, right? But I don't know. I worry about the skills there. I think his swing is kind of grooved, which is to say that it's like this takes the same path every single time, no matter where the ball is. So if it's an elevated fastball, he can't get to it. If it's a breaking ball below the zone, he can't get to it. If you leave it in the middle, he can crush it. But the higher up you go, the less that happens. So I'm a little bit worried. And his defense is backed up a little bit. He did play some shortstop for like an emergency situation, and he played some first base last year, which is not bad for a guy his size. He's 6'3", 6'4", 225 pounds. But yeah, if the bat doesn't come along this year, he might be out of baseball by next year, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's where you're talking about the swing. Sometimes it does feel like he's a little late on offspring stuff. And so I think that he still has a really good arm for third base. I think he has the ability to play a solid third base. The glove has come a long way since his debut down in rookie ball. However, you're right. If you can't, the system, if it's any indication of how the system, this is us talking about him in 2023 player candidate. And if that's an indication of how far the system has evolved, that's a good thing. I mean, it's not, I think there's still, Pacheco has a tremendous upside. Like you were saying about his age being within the average age of the Midwest League. So it is kind of a make or break year for him. And it's just 40 is an arbitrary number. It doesn't mean like he's, who knows, like a month from now, or who knows, in June, he could be number 20. We don't know.
Yeah. And realistically, the difference between our number 40 or 46 and like our number 25 is minuscule. Like it's like we said, the top 15, top 20 is really strong. And then after that, you're just kind of pulling bingo balls out of the jar and picking. But yeah, so it's a make or break year for Pacheco, but we'll see. He's got a chance to go out there and do it.
Yeah, and that brings us to number 39, Jake Holton, who's James Chipman, former kind of a guy who worked on the site, who got us going, would say he's a good org soldier. And he's a guy who really last year was critical down the stretch for Erie in a sense that because they lost Hayuli, they lost, I'm trying to think, they lost somebody else too. That they
lost Cruz. They
were ravaged by injuries.
Yeah. There was at least one more.
And him too. And he was having a good season.
They lost him.
Yeah, they lost him, and he was having a good season at the plate, hitting in terms of just hitting on a solid basis. But he's always been a good first baseman. Defensively, he's never been an issue. Nothing like that. He's a good, solid player that does what you expect him to do, which is hit for a little bit of power, walks at a decent clip. I mean, he had a good year. I mean, he was batting WRC plus a 140 last year with 14 home runs before he went down with his numbers are very eerily similar to they were in 2023, except less games because I think he broke his wrist, got hit by a pitch, right?
I think it was something like that. Yeah. And Yeah, he's kind of the opposite of Pacheco a little bit, and then he's a performer, but the tools don't really profile for the position, which is a bummer because, like you said, he's a very good defender at first base. He's got a strong arm. He used to be pitch too in college, and he gets on base. He's always working a double-digit walk rate. As you said, the WRC pluses are usually 120 to 140. Like, he's a good offensive player, and he hits for a little bit of average and a little bit of power. But as a first baseman, it's not enough power and it's not enough average. Like, we see that with Spencer Torkelson, right? Like, even hitting 30 home runs, he was barely valuable because the average wasn't there. It's really hard to be valuable at first base, and that's just it's unfortunate. And Holton is about to turn 27. So he's in this 35 FE range too, because he plays first base, and he could come up in an emergency, and he would probably be okay. I think he would work some walks. I don't think he'd hit for much average. He might run into a homer or two. Yeah, I think it'd be a Bly Madris sort of situation. But I don't think there's much ceiling there because he just doesn't, and he has raw power. It's just not enough game power. So that's why he's here.
Yeah. And he is a guy who, again, it's a classic David Chad pick too. Creighton, middle of the country. It's just like you can always kind of tell sometimes for those who, he's this guy who's been in the system since 2019, which is, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of those players, there's not a lot of them left.
Yeah, I mean he was the 10th rounder, I think, and that's the year they took Riley Green, and Nick Quintana, who's gone, who was traded and is now retired, and Lipsius and Kreidler, and then Kerry Carpenter, of course. But yeah, I don't think anybody else from that top 10 is still left. I guess Bergner was that year too, and he's still in the system. But Zach Hess is gone. The kid from Arkansas was gone like immediately.
Oh, the shortstop,
second baseman. Yeah, I forgot his name.
Man, I used to know this. Jack Henley. Yeah,
there you go. But yeah, so Holton's still around, like you said, good org guy. Next up is a really fun story. It's Patrick Lee. He's our 38th prospect. He came in to the system in May from Independent League. He was in the Frontier League where they found him, and he's a guy that he played at NAIA in college. I'm forgetting the name of the school. What is it? I'm looking. William Carey, before the Tigers signed him. So this is a guy who's not seen a lot of high level competition in his life, but he's tooled up, and he came in out of nowhere and really helped 3 different teams last year. He started in Lakeland, helped them a lot on their way to trying to win the first half title. They ended up not getting it by half a game. We talked about that before because of stupid rain. Stupid rain cost Lakeland a lot last year, but he helped them. He really helped them a lot chase that. And then he went up to West Michigan for 2 months and performed pretty well. We saw him in Lansing a bunch. And then he was up in Erie at the very end of the year. He didn't get to play a ton. He was kind of a bench piece, but he was a valuable bench piece. And so really cool story. And then it's even beyond that, the tools are pretty interesting. I don't know. What jumps off the page really is the speed. He's a really athletic kid, and it's not like lightning bolt to first base speed. He's kind of just average or a little above average to first, but he's a great base runner, really aggressive, really intelligent. Once he gets going, he's an easy plus runner, and that applies to the outfield. He's good at all 3 outfield positions, and he's got a really big arm. He's another guy who used to pitch. I put a 70 on his arm because we saw him a handful of times and saw him get outfield assists, a number of them.
Yeah, especially there was the time in Lansing too where he just it was a bullet from left field to second base was just like right on the line, just boom, and he got somebody out right there. And so that was where my eyes opened up a little bit. I know his agent's really active on social trying to get him out there, but it's worth mentioning too. It was a guy who, if you look at the Tigers' outfield depth as far as the minor leagues go, there wasn't a lot of guys who moved up a lot last year at all, if any. And Lee was the one that was kind of a guy who was able to hit 3 levels. Usually it's been the case has been the last 2 years or so. It's been pitchers, with the occasional infielder, but outfielders have been kind of really stuck at one level. And Lee did a really good job of hitting up to the point of going up to Toledo. Is he a guy who could potentially be a bench bat? He has to hit a little bit more, but there's a lot of intriguing tools about Patrick Lee that I like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is he's got a little bit of power. I wouldn't put anything above like below average, like, but enough to keep pitchers honest. The big question is just, is he going to be able to hit for average, do enough at the plate to get playing time? And, there were some things last year that suggested maybe not. He didn't hit very well against fastballs, and he struggled. Once guys could start locating their breaking balls and changeups, there was a lot of swing and miss. But again, he is almost 20. He's over 25, but he hasn't faced a lot of advanced pitching in his life. So it's possible that he improves a lot and kind of gets that to a level where the rest of his really impressive tools are useful, and he could come up and be a fifth outfielder or something like that and help a team. But he's really going to need to pick it up with the bat next year.
Yeah. And that's where that, again, same thing, like with, you look at a guy like very similar to what we had with Holton. It just, you just got to continue to hit. And that's as simple as that. Next up on our list is Yosber Sanchez, who does have an interesting history to him, Chris, because this is a guy who was originally signed by Texas. And then he pitched in Venezuela for the Cardenales, or I think it was, yeah. So he's got a little bit of history to him in terms of like a guy who knows how to pitch and really he's got some nasty stuff to him.
Yeah, he's so yeah, as you said, he signed with the Rangers, and then that was like 2017. And then he only threw 30 innings for them over like the next 4 seasons. Partially, he lost a year to COVID, and I think he was injured. I don't know exactly what the injury was, maybe multiple injuries, but he had barely pitched for them, and they released him. And then the Tigers snatched him up the next spring. I think they must have seen him in winter ball, and ever since he's been in the Tiger system, he's done really well. It's a really low ERA, lots of strikeouts. His fastball is upper 90s. It's touched 100. We saw him in person. It was 97, 98 consistently. It's not a terribly lively fastball. It's still pretty good velocity. And then he has a really good slider. And then he was working on a cutter and a changeup when we saw him. So he's got, 4 potential pitches. The slider is going to be the main one. And as I said, the strikeouts are there. His walks are under control. It's like 4.5 per 9, which is not ideal, but it's pretty usual for a reliever. The only question is, and I think he's probably ready to go to Double-A. The question is, will Double-A hitters chase the slider as much as hitters in the other levels have?
Yeah, and this is the reason why I wanted to point out the slider here is because the difference between that and the fastball in terms of velocity, you have that nice little change there from close to 100 to 87, which is really ideal for a late inning reliever like that. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. It's just you want to have that ability to have that separation like that, and I think he has potential closer stuff with him. But you're right. It is really up to whether or not he can make that adjustment to the next level. And I don't know. There's a lot of upside. What I like about Sanchez is that he does the walk. The fact that some of his walks, he was getting better as the season went along. So I know there's a thing with relievers in terms of like. Here's the live look we have for him right here. I wanted to show this. Here's an example that the fact that he has 4 pitches too. Like to me, it's something that if you're having a reliever has 4 pitches, if you have a 4 pitch, that's going to serve you well in a sense that like it gives you the ability to be either a closer or 6th or 7th inning guy. And I don't know, Chris. There's not a lot of relievers like that in the system where they could just go 4 pitches deep like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not with the velocity that he has. We talked like Silva has 4 pitches, and but yeah, he doesn't throw 100 like Sanchez does, and he doesn't have the slider that Sanchez does. He has a pretty good slider, but yeah, I mean, I think that the development of that the cutter and the changeup are going to be important for him as weapons against left-handed hitters to kind of keep them honest and away from the fastball, but. There's certainly potential there for a late inning relief profile. It just would, it involves a little bit more refinement of his pitches and a little bit better command. Yeah.
And that's all you can ask. And this is a guy, again, where the difference between him and number 30, anywhere in that area.
Yeah.
It's just like a stone throws away. So,
yeah. And,
then
yeah, and
and,
we
we finished. Let's go ahead, Chris.
yeah, we finished number 36 with Eliezer Alfonso, who is having an awesome winter league, but he's another guy that's kind of org soldiery, right? He's been around forever. He's actually probably one of their more successful international signings over the last decade, even though he hasn't made the big leagues. He's been a consistently productive, kind of valuable catcher. He just doesn't really have any kind of carrying tool, unfortunately. Like his best trait is his pure bat to ball skills. He's kind of an old school Dabal Lugo type, where like, you know, he can get his bat on anything, so he does for the most part. He's not a complete nothing at the plate. Like he'll walk 7-8% of the time, but it would probably be below average walk rate in the big leagues. And he doesn't ever swing and miss. His swing and miss rate was the second lowest in the system, behind Kevin McGonigal. But there's not a ton of power there. He did hit, I think, 9 home runs last year, but he's kind of grown into kind of stocky power, and he knows how to pull the ball at times. He's a switch hitter, and so he can yank it over the fence. But it's not, you know, I don't think it's a bat first profile by any means. And then on defense, he's not great. He's not bad. He's a solid receiver. He blocks well. The framing, I don't know.
I think I've seen some improvement though. I mean, in terms of like calling a good game, there's some definite improvement on that.
Yeah, and the main issue is he's got his arm just isn't very strong. It's like a 40 arm, unfortunately. It's pretty accurate. And there was a clip last year. He actually threw out Enrique Bradfield twice in one game.
We have the highlights.
Yeah, but and it's an accurate throw, but it's just not. He's not consistently strong. The pop times are below average on a regular basis.
Let's see how long it takes him to get going. He's on the first pitch out of the starting gate. Throw down to
it's just a perfect strike.
On him.
And yeah, so you know, as catcher, you can never have too many catchers. He's a switch hitter who gets on base.
Out in front of the bag, and the head first dive of Bradfield.
There's stuff to like there, but it does still, I think, fit that emergency call up profile, right? The guy that, you know, if somebody gets hurt, if a couple people get hurt at catcher, he gets called up. And it'll be interesting to see if they send him to Toledo or if he's back in Erie this year. I think that'll tell us a fair amount. And they already have a couple veteran catchers, I think, for Erie or for Toledo. So it may be back in Erie kind of caddying for Lorenzo, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's not a bad way to go either, considering, you know, the thing is with him, with the pedigree of his father, and I think that does help quite a bit in terms of calling a good game and having like a guy that's honored just can't, like Carlos Mendoza, for example. Mendoza also had a father who played in baseball, and it's just those kind of traits I think help in terms of being not, you know, a good org soldier or just a good overall player. So you know, yeah, you're right. I think the a tall tale sign was when they picked up Hicks from Texas, and he got more playing time down the stretch than Alfonso did for Erie, even though he was playing every day in Erie until the trade deadline. So now Hicks is I don't think the Marlins are gonna. The way the Marlins have done jack squat,
he's basically the only guy they've acquired this offseason.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean that's a good point. Like Hicks became kind of, and Hicks's profile isn't all that different than Alfonso's, but he became kind of the favored catcher in terms of the guy that pitchers threw to there in Erie down the stretch. And Alfonso was still playing. I think he was just DHing for the most part.
Yeah,
but
he went more of a DH role, but still, it was weird to see him not catch, because I know that's something that we've talked to him about. I had a chance to talk to him in spring training, and even I think I talked to him again in the middle of summer, that takes a lot of pride in his defense. And so I think that was something that maybe he has a chip on his shoulder heading into spring training. Who knows? But so next will be our next video will be 35 through 25
through 26, I guess.
26,
yeah, we're gonna do them 10 at a time.
Yeah. So it's 10 packs. So, yeah. So, just like dad bods, you have a 10 pack or whatever, or however terminology you want to use for it. That will be our next one. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel or again, Patreon for stuff that we're putting out ahead of time. And we're going to be, there's a report for this, our first 10 pack, and then the second 10 pack. And then, like I said, there'll be individual reports as well as February rolls on. So I can't believe we're only a few weeks away from spring training.
Yeah.
As we don't, again, as a time of recording, the Tigers still have no idea who they're going to bring in for a non-roster invite, or they haven't announced that yet, or their base has not been solved yet. As of recording right now, we're recording this a few days ahead of time, but a little bit of mystery there. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we will talk to you on the next 10 pack for players 35 through 26. Have a good night, everybody.